So, all right. So, welcome everyone to this month's AI in construction. As you guys, some of you may know, twice a quarter we do something where we talk to folks that are really applying AI in project workflows, and then once a quarter I'll do more of a briefing that's about the technology and so on. I've known Document Crunch for years, actually. Josh and I were talking about his company. I've been on my podcast and so on. So super excited to have them on today to talk about a few things. The core of what we want to get to is that it's great that ChatGPT can do some things and LLMs can do some things, but what we found at the link and what Document Crunch has found on their end as well is, you need to put it on rails, so to speak, because ultimately you're trying to give people consistent, reliable answers as opposed to creative and sometimes, shall we say, variable answers. So before I go too much further, Will Meurer has joined us. He's the Chief Product Officer of Document Crunch, and no better person to talk about how they're continuing to craft useful products out of these incredibly powerful technologies. Will, you want to do a quick intro?
Sure. Thank you. It's good to have everybody here and to be able to talk to you. Thank you for having me here. I am Will Moyer, the head of product. Like he mentioned, at Document Crunch. I've been part of the organization for over 2 years now. So about half the ride, actually. It looks like. I've actually been in construction software for quite a while. Was part of a company earlier in the BIM space, Assemble Systems, that's now part of Autodesk, and have been a part of maybe some areas in bid management and others. I really love the construction space in software. I'm very happy to be able to be a part of this very fascinating and fast-moving space of AI and being able to apply it to construction, because it's really certainly a great opportunity for us right now. And there's so much exploration, and I love exploring new ideas and new tech and bringing it to real world workflows. So that is a big interest of mine. I'm glad to be able to have that opportunity here. Looks like somebody wasn't getting audio. Can you all hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that may just be something for their issue. There won't be video right now. You're just seeing us talk. In fact, I'll probably unshare this so you can just see some talking heads. Will may be sharing some things with the product if that's appropriate. So what I wanted to be able to do today, as I mentioned, is talk through what it takes to actually create product that works in construction workflows. A good way to start with that, Will, is can you talk about where you guys were as Document Crunch, let's say 18 months ago? You were still using AI. You weren't really using generative AI because no one was, 18 months ago. So you had a baseline of what the product could do. Talk a little bit about that so that we can sort of set a baseline and get into what you then did after that.
Yeah, so we were really early on focused, and are still very much focused on what we can do with some of that deeper AI learning, that modeling that can really provide a lot of well-defined insights into what, in our case, your documents have in them. So those deeper learning models that are very point solution based, very specifically focused. That's something that we still rely upon now, even in the age of LLMs being now, because we've tested out how LLMs do that same type of work on the same topics that we've worked on, and we have seen that we outperform them pretty significantly. Not only do we outperform them on a regular basis, but we also are faster to find that same stuff in the same way for every document. It still makes the most sense for us to apply those well-trained models to those like larger documents over and over and over and over and over, because that is the highest accuracy that you could possibly get for finding the same stuff in documents over and over and over in the same way. So that all to say, for those areas of contracts and risk that you want to find on a regular basis in the same way, let me make sure I don't miss this topic. Maybe make sure that I know that maybe where changes in the work are discussed every single time I get a new contract in. I want to look at it in the same way. That's what that highly trained stuff is really good at finding, the highest accuracy possible. But when you start to get into items, what's great about LLMs and this new capability is now we can open it up to what about the stuff that we haven't defined? What about the nuanced approaches that your company yourself have to say changes in the work or to certain liability provisions or how you do things on the types of work that you do? Not everybody runs hospital jobs. Not everybody runs, government contracts. And so in those cases, it starts to open up like how can we apply our space and the ability that you have to find certain types of pieces of information and contracts over and over, and then really be able to pull those things together to provide value for a particular person, even more so than we'd ever be able to do before.
So let's zoom. That's great. Let's zoom out a little bit because not everybody on the call may know deeply what Document Crunch does, and I think you've just given some pretty specific examples of ways you've solved problems. Can you talk a little bit about how Document Crunch is used in workflows?
Yeah, so there are a few main parts of construction that are governed by the contract. There's everything in the pre. We always break it down into two sections, like what happens before you sign a contract for a job you're about to start, and what happens after you sign a contract. There's probably a lot more that pulls all those parts together, but we think about it in those ways. So before a signature on a document, you want to make sure that for your construction contract for this project you're about to endeavor into, that before you sign that contract, is it a good contract to sign? Is it close to the profile? Does it follow the profile of what risks we would usually take or the risk profile we have for our own company for the types of projects? So again, if you're running a hospital job, you might have, or you say you do design bid versus design bid build, you might want to make sure that there are certain governances in the contract, or there aren't certain governances that require you to cover the liability for, say, the design work that needs to be done. So if you are responsible for the design, it makes sense that it's there. But if you're not really responsible, you want to make sure that any engineering or design issues that come up during the job, you won't be responsible for, but you can at least get some ability to adjust to changes in that design as it happens. All of those things are governed by the contract. That's one specific example. There are many examples here, but when you start working a new job and looking at possibly bidding out or running a new project, there are a lot of questions you're going to have about what the risks are, what's missing, what is there on that document, and governing that job. And we find all of those important pieces. And in the same form every time. I always talk about if our product isn't the greatest way to review a contract and to see what's in your contract, we haven't done our job. And so for a lot of people, they go through, oh my gosh, it's an 800-page document. What's here, what's not? There could be some missing requirements that we would usually need to make sure we have protection for. Um, our product allows you to, in minutes, get a rundown of every single thing that's important that could be those issues. And so that's what we especially use those LLMs for, our highly trained models for, is we can find every single thing to a very high accuracy, 90+% accuracy for everything that is in your document in minutes. It means that you can look at a document in the same way and make sure that you're structured and you're negotiated on that contract to set up for success for that project. So once you get to a signature, then there's all these post-signature things that happen on a job. So after the signature, you're going to start working on pre-construction workflows. What should we do? How are we going to schedule the job? How are we going to make sure we have all the labor we need for the job? Maybe even finding all of your maybe additional subcontractors for a job if you're a general contractor. And so all of those workflows then start to have other items that are activities that are governed by the contract. And so what we do then is we find those same issues, but specifically orient the issues that we can find for you for the purposes of everybody actually executing that job. When you start executing and running a project, you don't really care as much about things like, well, what are the underlying financials of the company that's going to possibly underwrite this job or pay me. You care about how am I going to get paid? When do I get paid? And so all of the work that we do then is to find those parts of the contract, orient you to those most important activities that are going to be governed, and then make sure your team is running the job by the book, especially once you start construction.
So one of the things I want to point out is, in earlier things I've done, I will often draw a distinction between deep learning, which is sort of what we now think of as classic AI, which is funny since it's 10 years old, and more modern generative AI, which is, has also been around a little while. What I'm hearing you say is, um, for lots of what you do, um, deep learning is more accurate and more reliable, and that's what you've trained for more years. And when things are variable and you're trying to kind of deal with some new things, generative AI starts to make a little bit of sense. Does that distinction make sense to you?
Um, yeah, there's really just to more, I would say it's about what you can control and what you don't really have the ability to control, because the environment has different aspects of it. So there are some things that, like Josh, our founder, and our other founders, there are certain things that they know are consistent for every single job. Those are easy for us to train, and so those are the easiest to get the highest accuracy for, right? And then there are other items that are specific to areas and spaces that you care about, like, say, for example, hospital construction that might be highly regulatory, or even like California law versus other law. And so those are going to be the project specific items, in which LLMs are a little bit more capable of being more elastic or more flexible with how they respond and how they are thinking about the contract at hand. But to your point, you can't, I believe, is your question. You can't rely on that flexibility too much, because it could get wildly inaccurate then. Okay, well, if it's going to think for me, or if it's going to do some thinking, or or look through the contract and make some insinuations or some judgments, to what degree is it doing that for me? And so to that end, there are a couple of things that we think about and we work on as we've been building out a chat product for our own product, which we just recently have released. That chat ability is excellent, because what it does is effectively allows you to converse with your contract, talk with it as if you're talking to a legal person on your team or a back office person. Just ask it questions. Now, by all means, it is not a legal expert, and it never should be replacing your legal experts, but it certainly can get you over the hump and get you some sense of a better sense of really what kinds of initial questions you have, given the context you have. But with that, of course, if you've used ChatGPT at all, it can answer in some pretty odd ways. I've had it give me some responses about. I've asked it, can you tell me about this Excel formula I don't know a lot about? And it gives me something that is not Excel related at all. Okay, well, that's not very helpful. But when you're like me, not a legal expert, it's hard to tell the difference between what is real and what is correct and what is not. And so what we do is, any answer that we give in chat, we also show our work. We give you a page number to go and reference to find where we found that information, so that you can trust that speed and get that speed and accuracy and capability of the chat product. But it's also doing the best it can to answer and giving you the response for where it gave you the answer. Just like we were all asked to do in high school or earlier or later. Please show your work and give me the references below. In this exact same way, we can point you to where it is in the document. So if you do need to validate, or if you're not sure you trust it yet, you actually do get that foundational, cement of where we found that information in the contract.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think, one of the things that we often talk about is the difference between probabilistic software, which is what LLMs are. I mean, all AI is, but LLMs are particularly so, versus deterministic software, right? And I think what I'm hearing you say is, when possible, you want to be as deterministic as possible. So, this equals that, period, not this equals one of them. How do you think about that as a product guy who's, looking to build something that's useful?
Yeah, what I would first say is that it is not comfortable for us product and engineering people, because it is not a this plus this equals this scenario. And so But at the same time, I would say it's also incredibly powerful, obviously, and so we need to do the best we can to really harness the good parts and block out the challenges and the potential risks there. So um, so for us, we look at where the inputs that we can respond to so that it's the easiest for the user possible. If a user comes into our product, now I, as the product and UX person, would always say that our product is incredibly easy to use. But a good example of this is there are some people who might see like weather delays, but they might not think weather delays because they've always heard, say, like force majeure. So they go in and go, well, I don't see force majeure covered in your items, or maybe the opposite. They have another way of looking at something, and we do something have a different term in our product. They can go into chat and they can just very comfortably and easy just go, okay, where are the force majeure issues, right? Okay, so first of all, I found that I and many people don't even spell force majeure correctly. But even in that case, it's nice because chat will respond and it knows exactly what you mean. It will find those weather issues, delays, all those types of considerations in the contract and can respond to you and give you that, again, that reference in the contract to where it is so you can go and do the finding that you need to. But what's great is that we also have the ability to start to catch some of those questions. Like, say, for example, you did do a question about weather delays, or in the case you're running the project currently, executing the project currently, and said, "Oh, I have a flood in our area. I don't know how to handle this. What steps should I go through according to the contract?" It can respond with a lot of those steps. But if there's an opportunity for us to do even more, then and go, okay, well, you're asking something about that topic. Let me either provide you more explicit links to that area in our product that talks about weather delays or scheduling delays or how you handle notices, or even provide ways to provide notice for you automatically. So we know that you're talking about delays and floods. So here are the steps you probably need to go through according to your contract. But that also means that you might have an interest in generating a notice for the owner so that they know that you have to adjust the schedule, or you might have to have those delays. So all of those things are then possible. So wherever possible, wherever we can, we're going to be keeping it open and unstructured, that undeterministic space to provide that access to people. And then anywhere we have the ability, like we've done with our models, or that we're starting to add on these jobs to be done focuses, when we can recognize things that people are working on, or it looks like you're asking this, much like Google might ask, we should be working on capturing those workflows and then handling those very strongly or as well as we possibly can so that you can go through very common workflows as easily as possible.
I love that point, and I want to tease it out a little bit. This idea that the LLM sort of more variable, more flexible interaction creates a pipeline where some things where you start to see them more and more, they look like they're worth the investment to really, do in a more deterministic way. I'm going to stick with that terminology for a little while. But you said strong, and I think we're saying the same thing, that you've trained a more definitive model to be able to handle it when you see something more and more. Are you starting to do that where again the LLM sort of thing becomes a pipeline, and you can filter a subset that says, okay, we want to be able to handle these really well because they're common enough that they're worth the investment?
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly how we're thinking about it, and that's one of the things that we really value out of from our customers is any feedback that we can get, and also just feedback from use. We've seen a lot of great, interesting conversations happening with chat, and we can ask our customers about like where are you getting value and what kinds of items have you started to poke around, and where is it helping your teammates. Now, each person in the conversation, especially as this gets more broadly used, you're going to have lots of different workflows. There's no way we're going to be great at every single workflow out there, but we can also now see what are people asking about the most. And we can use that as kind of a way to learn about what would be most valuable to our customers, which is something we do without LLMs. So it'll be great even with LLMs to do that as well. But yeah, we're learning a little bit about that there. But then we also know that we have opportunities to start to help people build their own models, even outside of just LLMs, but just in those more strongly deterministic, more focused models, well-trained models that those will enable us to offer even more support for customers as that gets a little bit easier. As LLMs can find different items and different topics, and we see that those are relevant to people, then we'll be able to start using that to train our own system, either to find that information in those topics better in our product, or to strongly or deterministically handle some of those workflows. One example of this that we've seen even before LLMs was after the pandemic happened. A lot of back and forth and craziness in the logistics world, of being able to get materials to jobs, and then prices started increasing, and everything became a lot more variable than it was in the past. And we started seeing this, that people started putting material price clauses, or talking about material price escalation clauses, trying to protect themselves so that if materials significantly fluctuated after the initial bid was agreed upon, that there is some protection for everybody, so that they could get recouping for those costs. So we trained our models to work on material price escalation. And now in our product, you can see we well handle that topic. So it's always a combination of some level of customer feedback and usage feedback that helps us do the job better. But then LLMs will also help us get a lot of that understanding of unstructured topics, and then we will be able to build even some additional tech to understand a little bit more category based on how we can improve that going forward.
That's awesome. So I'm going to pause for a minute. We've had some great questions in the chat. The first one I want to get at, Jonathan asked to define LLMs, and I'll dig into that. So, folks, when we talk about AI, most of the time until recently, we were talking about deep learning, which is where you put a bunch of data through things and you train it to do something. And some of what Will's been talking about is effectively that. A version of that is you're taking an existing natural language processing model and kind of fine tuning it off the top. LLMs are what ChatGPT is, or it's what's under ChatGPT. They're also deep learning, but they're massive, like orders of magnitude larger, and trained in a new way. It's actually architecturally different from classic deep learning. Again, it's funny that I use the word classic deep learning when it's like a decade old, but it's meant to look at passages and parts of sentences as opposed to just the next word or the next piece. So when we talk about LLMs, you can imagine in your mind we're using the same sort of thing as a ChatGPT. When we're talking about other models, it's a little bit more like Siri still kind of is, and some of the other AI that you might have heard of 5 years ago, or really until about 2 years ago. So those are the two main things we're talking about. The other thing that Will has been talking about, and is, again, I'm building software myself, so sometimes it's not even an AI that you're using to find things that are really easy to find. You might be using keywords or versions of keywords that help to make the problem smaller. One of the points about AI generally is anything you can do to make the problem smaller means you need less data and you can be more accurate. So that's sort of the theme of today is, and we've been digging into it. How do you think about software as a product, not, hey, I've got an AI, let's see what we can wrap around it to do cool stuff. And a lot of what Will has been talking about is exactly that, is that they're into it now, and they've got a pretty solid team that's been working on just this for a while. So they're starting to get quite sophisticated about how they use one type of tool with another type of tool. And the open questions or things that are less clearly defined, that's where the LLMs make sense. And then if they see 20 of those, they say, hey, people are doing this a lot, let's move this over to some of the more tried and true and more controllable, for lack of a better word, options. And Will, I want to ask a question from Paul here, because this is a quick one. Topics that aren't covered in the contract, does it provide counsel on those aspects as well? It's more of a product question than an AI question, but.
Yeah, so first I will say we would never call ourselves counsel. So definitely a big distinction for us, and that's actually a distinction that ChatGPT and others are saying as well. Like we're doing the best we can to guide or to orient and answer what we can, but would never consider ourselves actual replacement for counsel. But that to be said, to your topic question about other topics, yes, really a lot of we actually do a lot of work to frame the answers and the way that it can answer you, um, because we don't want to go outside the bounds of our space. We certainly want to be careful about saying we're even counsel for the space that we're in, but we certainly don't want anybody to believe that we have expertise significantly outside of the area of construction and contracts, because that's our big focus for our customers. But that being said, as well, yes, it can really look between the lines. So there are a lot of things that we find out of the box, and most of the time, those 45-ish provisions that we find out of the box are everything that that people need. There are always things that people go, oh, but there's this one topic that might be between these other topics, or instead of how you find insurance, can you find this specific insurance question about maybe liability insurance or some other type of specific type of insurance that's required for the job? In that case, it will answer those questions very, very directly. And what's great is that not only can we give you the overview, but you can get very specific, context specific answers to your questions. So I ask a question sometimes like, because I'm in doing a job in the Houston area where I'm from, so I get to say these things about Houston. There's lots of floods and bad weather on a regular basis. What should I expect? Based on the contract and how many days I might have for coverage for weather events, or what kind of coverage I have for constructing this project in the case of major weather delays. So it can give you some really context specific answers that really fill the gaps where we might not be able to do that because we can't be everything for everybody. It's one of the great parts of this world of LLMs is that for everything that we've always built software for in the past, like to your point, Hugh, it's all about this deterministic world of somebody needs to be able to do this in the product. Well, let's build this thing so that they can do that thing in the product. We've done that. And now with LLMs, if there's something we haven't done, you can still do it all. I mean, to a large degree, to your point, Paul, if there's a topic we haven't covered, now you can probably find that topic still. It might not be something that you'll get in the same way every single time consistently from contract to contract, but now you have the flexibility to find that as you need it.
That speaks to this point that companies like Document Crunch are valuable because you're not saying we can do everything. OpenAI is saying we can do some of everything, but not all of anything. And you're saying, no, we're deep and we really know this. And one of the things you've now said a number of ways is the knowledge, experience, and I don't know how many lawyers are working at Document Crunch, but more than one. Adding experience from not just from law school, but from being actual practicing lawyers. I mean, like I think the genesis of the company was Josh being a corporate lawyer at a big GC and saying, hey, the same questions keep getting answered, and I am an expensive way to answer this. So why don't we start automating? So you could almost imagine this all started by saying there's 45, to use your number, 45 things that I get asked about a lot. Okay, let's build a product for the 45. Then you start growing from there and adding this context. And the fact that you're adding context and usefulness on top of what the LLM provides is another part of the story here that I want to bring out is the LLM on its own does not know anything that's going on that it isn't trained on. It doesn't understand knock-on effects. It doesn't understand how the world works, all that stuff. So it's going to give you the best answer it can based on what you've asked it. But there's going to be other things that you can provide that give it context or make it more useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, yeah, that we have practicing lawyers that have practiced in the field, so they know, okay, these are the things people ask me. But especially like in Josh's case and other people on our team, it's specifically in construction, which is one of the things that we really believe is a great thing for our customers, is that the subject matter expertise is very great in our company, and now we're marrying that subject matter expertise, that expert experience that we already have, with that capability of the LLMs and that really great generative world of I can understand the world now, and now you understand contracts and construction, and then we marry that with your specific situation that you need to get the most information, the most benefit that you can. That's really what the great power is of LLMs in this new world. Is you can take your expertise, mash it with the ability to understand and to understand and analyze information at a large size very quickly, and then get very specific answers to your questions as fast as possible.
And one of the things that in a pregame with your team we were talking about is you're actually using Josh called a kind of retrieval augmented generation, where you're taking some of the deep learning and using that in conjunction, or other parts of the software in conjunction with the LLM. Do you want to talk a little bit about how the LLM plugs into other parts? Like, we've kind of talked about it as if you're asking the LLM directly, but you've obviously augmented it in more than one way. How did that work, and what was the process?
Yeah, I mean, it is still an ongoing process. It will be a very good, big, ongoing process for a long time. So we are pretty right now. We're still pretty document focused. So one document at a time. Now you can load that up with a 1,000+ page document, and it's great. But a lot of the work for these LLMs is, like I said, you're bringing your expertise, which is great. That's one part of the equation. So we build that into the way that we ask questions under the covers, and how we prompt and include a lot of that information and expertise, like the models that we have, right? That we've strongly trained. And then you have this great LLM, but what are you actually providing for the context of, like, say, for the customer themselves, for this particular project or for this particular contract, what's going on? So we have to do the best we can to provide the most relevant information to LLMs, and to include and mix in our expertise. I won't go into deep detail there, but there is a lot and there's also, because I literally cannot understand a lot of what our incredible team does on a regular basis. But there are a lot of requirements and needs around finding the most relevant information, which we do incredibly well because we've trained to do that relevant information very well. Being able to mix that in with the contract itself, and then providing the most necessary information given the question you're asking, and making sure we're getting the best response we can. That's going to become a larger, it already is, as you probably know, it's a giant effort in the space of AI, and this new world of Gen AI is, to be able to provide the right information given the right question being asked, to provide the best answer possible. So that will be a constant effort for us. But it also is not even just for that, but it's also going to be like, to what broad degree can we provide information? So as you can imagine, there's a lot of context that is important for any question that anybody's asking. When you're asking a question about a particular contract, and say, well, for this school, how many square feet is this job, or what are the liability requirements for this job? You know that a lot of information about what your previous jobs have been, and LLMs have no idea, and we don't have necessarily yet all the information that you have in your company about what your company has done before, what your capability is what you've done on previous jobs, and how you would usually handle this, how Texas might, because that's the governing law. There's some of that stuff that we can mix in now, but a lot of the benefits down the road are going to be about how can we get the most context and relevant information so that it can make the best decision and answer about what's giving you in response.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things that people talk about is the speed with which these underlying LLMs are changing and growing. One of the comments was about AGI, which is, I think that's a little bit like self-driving cars. Like, it'll come, but it's hard to build a product and count on it. But nevertheless, things are changing pretty quick. Sometimes there's smaller models, sometimes there's more focused models, yada yada. How do you guys track that? Like, how does that I mean, it probably is a little bit of the tech team that's mostly focused on this. But could you talk a little bit anyway about how you think about that?
Just the speed of change and all
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah, and on the LLM
Yeah.
side specifically, right?
Yeah, it's exhausting. And I say it's exhausting partially because many of you might also know one of my other coworkers, colleagues, longtime, Trent Miskelly. He's our operations officer here, and he has a great tech background. He's been in this area of software as well for a long time, especially in the construction space. And I will tell everybody this, and I will tell y'all right now, that guy reads a lot of stuff. And if I were to attribute our staying on top of what's going on in the world, it's because he stays on top of it more than anybody else, and he sends us so much information. But that's to say, like, there is so much available right now. And what we do is especially have to pay attention to, of course, competitor spaces and legal tech and legal AI, because there's a lot going on just in the legal space in general. Um, so that's really helpful to pay attention to. But then additionally, we especially on this RAG stack retrieval augmented generation that you were talking about earlier, there's a lot about that is really a big area of focus right now for everybody. And that's, I think, a lot of where the differentiation is happening about what information is available, what context are people getting to these LLMs, and what can we provide, and building the best responses possible. So that's to say, like, there are areas of focus and you can't cover everything. And so you need to find where that your world is going to probably be affected by the most, and especially focus your efforts in the nuances and the advances in those spaces. And then hopefully you have a Trent Miskelly on your team that can provide you way more information than you'd ever possibly be able to do on your own. And then you just have to follow the best people in those spaces on Twitter, on LinkedIn, in other places that you can, to find the best wealth of knowledge. Follow everything that OpenAI does. Follow everything that Google is doing with their space in AI and Bard. Follow all of those groups and stay as open as possible right now, because the probably the most difficult thing you can do right now for yourself is to believe that the one company in one space that is going to be the winner here. I don't think anybody knows that. So do the best you can to stay open, but also find the areas that are especially focused in areas that you're trying to solve for.
Well, also, and especially talking to a product guy, it's important not to get distracted by all that hype too, in that you're looking for a tool. You're not starting with the tool and saying there's got to be some nails out there, because my gosh, I've got a really great hammer. So I think some of what I hear you talking about, and actually why we're even having this conversation, is to keep in mind that you're looking for the right tool for the job. Now, it's true that large language models and AI generally can make new things possible, which is wonderful, and you do new things like you talked about. 2 years ago, you probably wouldn't have been able to chat with the contract like you can right now, right? So it opened up a new capability, but you don't necessarily say, great, we're going to replace everything else with this Ferrari, right? Like it's not great for getting milk or bringing the kids to school. Yeah. So you're going to use the most efficient, most reliable, and hopefully the lowest cost to maintain software and technologies that make sense, right? So the fact that Llama 2 has come out and it does whiz bang stuff, or even better, that it can do multimodal. Well, we're not doing anything multimodal, so it's wonderful that it can make pretty pictures, but contracts don't have pictures, at least not really.
Yeah, your point is a very good one, and it's something that we do really have to anchor ourselves to, is especially for us as a company. Not generally speaking, it's a little bit different, but us as a company, we constantly have to refocus ourselves on and check ourselves on what are the fundamental value propositions, what are the fundamental things our customers are trying to do, and to do better and to do faster and easier. And then let's break that into a space of workflows and all of those parts, like I was talking about in the life cycle of a contract, of the pre-signature workflows, post-signature, what goes on. Map those spaces of what customers are doing, not different ways that you think that you can use LLM in the process.
Yeah.
And if you do that, if you really focus on customer value, then I guarantee you will find places. We've already found a lot of places that would benefit from this, but really ultimately you want to get them to their goals, not your goal of how many different things can we apply this to in different parts of the process, right? So we always focus on that first, and where LLMs make a lot of sense, we're aggressively pursuing moving those into our product as fast as we can.
So awesome. And that's the game now, is being aggressive and careful at the same time. So Alan asked a question that's, I think, one we can spend some time on here. Some of the point of what we've been saying is that you're not just taking an LLM and throwing a product at it, or throwing a document at it. You're building a reliable workflow. So Alan's question is, what's the main differentiator between Document Crunch and creating your own GPT within the team enterprise? And I kind of gave some of the answer, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because we're going to hear that a lot, and you must hear that. It's like, oh, I can do that now. I can dump it in and it'll give me an answer. It's great.
Of course.
Like, well, maybe it can, and maybe it's going to tell you, something from another contract.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, and we do get this question sometimes, and we will get it more and more. Especially now that we have chat directly in our product, like there is a great question about that. What we do particularly well, like I said, was we have a very strong understanding of a breakdown of what the content is, of what are the areas of the contract that are important and the most impactful in construction. And so because we have that strong understanding, we can blend that with that capability that we're providing with LLMs, like with ChatGPT type products and others. And by blending those two things together, again, we're bringing that expertise and that strong understanding of what is in a contract with the contract itself, and using LLMs to make come to some conclusions, or to answer questions about those things. So it's the mixing of all three of those parts of the expertise together. Your situation, general world, and contracts and construction, and legal topics in construction, and understanding. So that's really one of the big parts of, like, for that chat piece, what is a little bit different. But our product in general is not chat. It is not just some chat piece that has been added to products. We support a lot of great product features and workflows that people have across the construction and especially the contract lifecycle. So when you are doing that pre-signature initial assessment of a risk to do a risk review of your contract, we have that breakdown, but we also have things like standardized process checklist oriented to those most important items of what should I care about, making sure I get to a good analysis or a good conclusion about, is this a contract I want to pursue or is it not? Once you get into negotiation, we also apply a lot of that now directly into Word. So if you're negotiating in Word, we can provide a lot of that benefit and that explanation about what's important and what's not directly in Word, so you can go back and forth with the other party and have that highly supported negotiation process in Word where you do that work. And then beyond that, we have other workflows, especially that we're starting to explore now, post-signature, where say, for example, once you start working the project, we can break down the most important issues on the job and then orient you in the contract to finding answers to your questions. So it could be about chatting with your contract at that point, but it also could just be that you want to get a reference of some specific situation you're handling, or exactly the parties that are involved and notice that you need to get to, or other pieces of information that are directly contractor related. And then because you have all of your contracts in one place with our product, there are all these overarching benefits to getting understanding of what was in previous contracts and getting that intelligence and information back into the process the next time. So there's a lot more to Document Crunch, in other words, than just the chat side, but even chat itself is much more nuanced and capable because of our expertise.
And there's a general point, and I got a question I want to answer or ask as well. There's a general point here, and that is, chat isn't a product. I mean, it's a product like, I don't know, like Google is, but it's not. What real software like Document Crunch and my own company, The Link, we spend a lot of time building software around it that makes it into a tool, not just an engine, or not just an undirected thing. So what you're going to find sometimes is when you if you upload it, God forbid, an 800-page document, you're going to get really variable results if it's just dumped into ChatGPT, and it's probably going to be better at the beginning and end and not in the middle, is what we understand. So there's all sorts of things that you do to improve the accuracy and reliability of the answer. Because if you just keep, if you ask the same question, even Sam Altman will say this. If you ask the same question, I think his quote from a recent podcast, you ask the same question 10,000 times, you're going to get 10,000 answers. And we want to get better and better this year. They are. at being able to, compress the number of answers you get so that it's more stable and more reliable. Um, so a question that comes up a lot is, how can you be sure that client data won't be accessed by others? Now, frankly, this is just, I hate to sound like this, but sort of just software, like having it be multi-tenant and have walls between things. But there has been a concern about LLMs, especially ChatGPT. Two issues have come up. One of them is that your data is going into their model to train it. I'm sure that the API you're using doesn't do that, but I'd love you to talk about it for one sec. The other thing, though, is RAG sometimes can, retrieval augmented generation can sometimes make it so that people can actually tell it to download, like you can access the original kind of RAG source. Also something that I believe has been addressed. Can you talk about the model training issue first?
Yeah, so that is something that has come up a bit, especially more recently because people are starting to understand a little bit, especially tech teams at construction companies. They're very adept at what's going on in the world and what information should be shared and the how companies that their internal customers are working with. Like ours and others, what information is being shared where. So we certainly are keeping everything pretty separated at this time. I mean, very separated this time, from the perspective of what we're sending up to, to chat and others. Um, uh, we um, we have been very deliberate in our approach and are continuing to be very deliberate in our approach about how we're going to be able to separate that information, especially crossing the boundaries of customers information, so that some information about some contract, like generally what ChatGPT will be able to do for people is, find in the corpus of the world of information. It'll probably give you some pretty good specifics about things that it has learned from, say, there's a great example of the New York Times issue right now where they're talking about, listen, you're using our information and it was used to train the model. And so there's a lot of benefit that you're getting. You owe us money. And so I think that there's that on the training side, but for us, we're using it more on the consumer side where the information that we're sending, there are a lot of restrictions around what ChatGPT can do with that information, and we fortunately are able uh, to use that also as a model for us. Because they're starting to figure out a lot about that, about what should be able to be used and trained on and what shouldn't be able to be used and trained on. And we're using that as a model in many ways and still discerning our own model for limiting the scope of training versus responding. And that's the big focus that people should be looking at.
Yeah, and I think to build on that, and I think there's even some answers in the chat, no pun intended. There are OpenAI as early as 9 months ago, I think, allowed you to get APIs that you could build into a product like ours and like Document Crunch, that they explicitly don't. Your data doesn't go into to train anything. Otherwise, you're just talking about software the way it anyway would be, and whether Document Crunch uses user information to make their product better is one thing, but from a security standpoint, I mean, if there is a company in this industry who's going to be uptight about that, it's going to be the one that's dealing with contracts. So I think you can have every confidence that confidential information doesn't get leaked.
Yeah, and also that point, we are aggressively, pursuing the highest quality SOC 2 compliance standards, and have those in place already. And we'll continue doing that because it is a very important part of our space. It is a very important part of the promise that we make to customers to make sure that we're providing them a great product, but not undermining their fundamental needs of privacy and security. And so, yeah, to the point that Alan has made as well, the ChatGPT team and otherwise do not use their data to train the model. But for what they actually do train the model on, those people, like I was mentioning, New York Times, they have trained, and in some ways they're still trying to understand where they do train, how they need to be able to limit that, or provide restitution for the people who, or compensation for who they have used to train on, which again goes to the point that the advantages of large language models and the benefits of those go to general knowledge, more publicly accessible general knowledge. And that's why products like ours, mixing in your information specifically to help convey context and understanding for your particular area of interest or your particular project. That's why that is so important to really build an opportunity for us to build great products, because it can't know everything about your particular case and situation. We have to provide just enough information to it to answer that at that time. And so that local retrieval information and all that we've talked about, that RAG-SAC stuff, that's where that comes into play, because it can't know all of those things, because it can't train on all of that information. And we have to be able to localize that knowledge and then send up what knowledge we can at that moment, right?
So awesome. I want to kind of bring this in for a landing and talk a little bit about what we see happening this year, and how folks on this call and that watch this later might be thinking about using AI. Let's talk about generative AI, LLMs, but generally as they go forward. How are you seeing this evolve?
So maybe a little bit more specific there.
Yeah, we talked about how you're using LLMs to allow people to chat with it. One of the things that is in the air, and you can kind of do it now, depending on how you build it, is actually have LLMs do multi-step things for you, as opposed to just one-off chat. But actually, you can say, "I need you to go do X, Y, and Z for me, and come back with a result." Is that something you guys are looking at? And forgive me if it's in the product now, but that seems like what the agent idea is certainly maturing this year.
Some people talk about it with like agent orientation or like multi-turn, or can it do a couple of things for you and then figure out what else it needs to do so that it can go and do those things.
Yeah.
We certainly have some background and some research that we're doing around like what we could really do with that. A lot of the more like top of mind items that we're doing beyond chat are really focused on looking at what normal jobs that people have to do, as they say, jobs to be done. Like, what regular parts of the process are people doing right now that, or are they not doing right now, that are just cumbersome or take a lot of time and effort, and even the startup to get to that activity done is difficult. So, for example, we know that we have this product in our this feature in our product called our project team cheat sheet, which basically, once the contract is signed, we break down all the most important issues that you probably are going to want to pay attention to, and your project team is going to need to know about the contract, that's going to govern activities on the job as you execute and perform that job. That's great. And we can point you to where you go in the contract to find all of those situations. And if, say, you're a legal person on the team, or a back office person, or a project executive, you want to set your team up well, you can go in and summarize those areas of what we have found and where we found everything in the document. And then give your team maybe some bullet points that they especially need to care about. Like, for payments, you need to pay within 15 days, and here's the amount of retainage you can have, and you can hold back, and all of those aspects of payments. That's really great, but most people we've found have a hard time even spending enough time doing that work, like on the back office side, to set their teams up well. So there's an opportunity that we're pursuing right now to find ways to just build the entire cheat sheet and summarize the entire contract for those purposes right off the bat. So why should I need to do that at all? It's not chatting. It's like a save set of chats that are very well defined, that we know are important, that would be how Josh would talk about it with the project engineers or the project managers on the project, all built into one very quick to provide summary to the team. So there are those types of very activity specific things that people can't do yet, that even before we get into like multi-agent world, are such big benefits that we could provide to people, that we're pursuing those pretty aggressively, top of mind right now. And we'll probably see more and more about the opportunities for multi-turn, like agent work as well, as we start to work through some of those other problems. Again, I would reiterate that to your earlier point, we have to be very customer and activity and value centric. The first thing that we should be thinking about is really what are people doing and what are they trying to what benefit are they trying to get? And for us, that's always going to be how can we help them get the most success and profit out of the job according to the requirements and by the book contract that they have. And then anything that we do with multi-turn agents or anything like that will be in support of that.
That's great. And I think that is the path towards agents, right? Is that you're finding things that happen over and over again, and the collection of steps is pretty well understood. And then from there, you can get more sophisticated. Well, Will, this has been really great. I really appreciated how you guys are applying different types of AI, and hopefully folks on the call have gotten something out of really understanding that it isn't all or nothing. You're not building an LLM product. You're building a product that uses LLMs where they make sense and other tools where those make sense. And the other thing that comes out of it that I really like is a bias towards using simpler things when you can, and only using more sophisticated things when they provide something nothing else can, which it sounds like you guys really have a strong focus on. So if there are no other questions, which it looks like they're not, I think we might go ahead and wrap up. So yeah, well, Will, thank you. This has been great. Folks that have joined us, I really appreciate you being here. We will be putting this online probably tomorrow. So for folks that weren't able to stay the whole time or would like to look at it, it'll be available. So, Will, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate being here.